So this just may be the moment where it gets real. This is Sandi Maki, and I'm doing a little bit of heavy breathing just after midnight today. I was just on Facebook checking in, and I got kind of a warm and fuzzy twinkling feeling when I saw a post on Facebook from a friend of mine, Robbie, who said that it was a good episode today of heavy breathing. He was paying attention, and he admitted to being one of the people who watches postings but doesn't always say hello. So he did. And I've got to tell you, from my perspective, that was such a great gift, because I know I do these for me. I thoroughly enjoy doing them. And every once in a while, it's just really great to get that feedback. So thank you, Robbie, because you made my night. And then I was going to call it a night and probably turn in. But as it happens some of these days, my mind just started spinning. And as I was looking at my Christmas tree and my holiday decorations that my kids put up when I was out of town recently, kind of in the beginning of November, so you get a sense of the time frame here, I was thinking about holiday traditions, and Thanksgiving is coming up. And I started what I thought was going to be a long-term holiday tradition when my kids were old enough to know about the decorating of the Christmas tree. Every Thanksgiving, it was going to be my holiday tradition that the Christmas tree would go up and we would all spend time putting it up together. And sometime round about New Year's Day, the tree would come down. Well, when my kids were a little bit younger, this worked out really, really well, since I was in charge. And then something happened several years ago. I was gone for the day. I don't know if I was working or traveling or what the case was. And I came home, and my kids had already put Christmas together. They put the tree up, all the ornaments on, the lights were on. And I can't remember now exactly what month it was. It might have been August. I know that the tree has been up as early as October. I think one year it actually went up in July, and then it got retired to the basement. You see, I think my kids were paying attention. And I think that because I was starting the tradition of putting the tree up together, they knew how much it meant to me. So they decided that they wanted to surprise me with something that I would really enjoy. And at first, when they did it, when they surprised me, I have to admit that I had a little pang of disappointment, because this was supposed to be the tradition in the way that I wanted to do the tradition. And what I realized was that the tradition was even better when they put their spin on it. So I was thinking about this after having felt warm and fuzzy, and I was thinking about people authentically sharing their story. And I thought that I really haven't shared my story, my real authentic story, with any of you. I know that a few of you may know it, but even those that are closest to me don't always get the full version. There's pieces, there's glimpses, and maybe somehow you can put the dots together. But more often than not, there's a lot that I leave unsaid. So that's what I mean when I say this might be the day when it gets real. My story isn't any different than anyone else's story, but it is because it's mine. And it's not to say that there's any story that's, on any scale different than anyone else's. We each have our own story. If you care to listen, I would like to share with you a little bit more of mine. I do have a post that I'll share in the near future about the first speech that I gave. I never thought I would have a speaking career. I hadn't decided that I wanted to have a speaking career. And a funny thing happened when we started the Insights group. We started coming into a lot of experiences that we didn't necessarily expect. So we were hosting a speakers collaboratory in our building, and I happened to show up. I hadn't planned on speaking or participating, and somebody looked at me and said, "Sandi, why don't you give a speech?" And I said, "Sure." And I scrambled for something to talk about, and I decided I would talk about free hugs and the sign that sat in front of my office. So I did. When I was done, people's jaws were dropped, and they asked how many times I'd given that speech before. And it was really my first impromptu speech on the topic, and my first improv speech ever. I got some great feedback. Needless to say, that positive reinforcement was very, very much appreciated. And yet, I still didn't start to share that story. And I don't know why. Maybe I felt just a little bit too vulnerable, or maybe it wasn't time yet. So I will share that. You'll see it posts here soon. The free hugs story, the free hug story that I told, which really was the launching of my speaking career. When I was in high school, I did participate in forensics. A friend of mine, Jessica, and I always did I don't even remember what they called it. We were like a duo or pairs. And what we had done was we learned stories. Actually, we learned a story together. It was the importance of being earnest. And we did this in forensics in the style where you are side by side and you never look at each other. So we told this story there. I had also done a couple independent things. So telling stories and doing this type of thing is something that I was naturally drawn to a little bit, although it really always made me nervous. But maybe that was prepping me a little bit for this. So here's a little bit of my story. I'm the oldest of 5 children. I have 4 younger brothers. My youngest brother was born when I was in high school. So there are several of us that are close in age, and then one that came along a little bit later. Growing up, I lived in Upper Michigan. It's very outdoorsy. I wouldn't call myself outdoorsy today, but back when I was a kid, I definitely was. Well, when I was in high school, I ended up switching schools from an area that I had lived in my whole life back to my mom's hometown. And there were a variety of reasons from this, one of which was she wanted my educational experience to finish up in the place where she had gone to school. She didn't like, and my parents didn't like some of the things, some of the choices being made in some of the other situations, so that's what happened. And I had gone to stay until my parents moved up with my aunt and uncle. And I started my sophomore year in high school in a brand new school. This was fascinating to me, not necessarily at the time. I did have a choice, and I did choose to do this, and I chose to go ahead early. It was really a pretty cool thing to be able to set the reset button. So when people say that moving around as a kid, I didn't do it a lot, but I had a pretty significant move when I was in high school. And that resetting of that reset button was absolutely phenomenal. And it was probably all mental from my perspective. But when you grow up with kids, you do have some type of bonds. And you also carry that luggage with you of all the shared experiences that you have. Well, when you show up in a new school, yes, you are the new kid and you don't quite fit in and you don't have the shared history, but you also have an absolutely open canvas to paint on it whatever you'd like. Well, my high school experience was made slightly more complicated because it was before the co-oping started happening with all of the colleges, and I had been in a lot of the accelerated programs in the school, which was larger, that I transferred from. So when I hit the school that I eventually graduated from, Chassell High School, graduating class of, I believe, about 23 students, if I remember correctly, where I came in 4th, by the way. When I transferred, there weren't enough classes as a sophomore. So I was technically a sophomore, but I had to take all the classes with the juniors and seniors because I had already been in some of the accelerated programs. Well, fast forward through my high school career where I was on the swim team and the school that I had been at before, I had played some tennis and volleyball. So, relatively active in a few of those things. I do believe I did a stint on the high school quiz bowl team as an alternate for a while, which was interesting. But here I am, reset button, clean slate, new school, don't quite fit in with my class and don't quite fit in with the other class, but here I am having this experience. Well, as it turns out, I ended up with enough credits to graduate from high school as a junior, technically. So about halfway into my junior year, turns out I was actually a senior. Hurry up and get some senior portraits taken and go on and graduate, which I did. So I was 16 when I graduated from high school. And then I started college because that's what everybody does, right? They graduate from high school and then they go to college. So I started out my college career at Michigan Tech University in Houghton, Michigan. Pretty much an engineering school. They have biology classes too. So being that we all know how incredibly excited I am about anything analytic or spreadsheets, obviously I was in the biology classes. Well, it turns out that that wasn't quite my thing either. And at that point I was busy living. So here's where the story starts to get even a little bit more interesting and something that I don't normally share with people. Instead of finishing college at Michigan Tech, I ended up getting married, and my daughter Kaylee was born when I had just turned 18. At the time, there was probably a lot of people looking and wondering at exactly what had happened. And I'll tell you that in my life, the exact perfect thing had happened. So my daughter was born, and my husband at the time enlisted in the Army, which was probably one of the best things that he could have ever done for himself and for our family, and for which I will always be grateful. So he enlisted and we spent a little bit of time apart, and then we did end up getting stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, which turned out to be quite an adventure. Yeah, I think that while a lot of others my age were partying and doing the college scene, I was growing up really, really fast. And not that it took a lot of growing up quickly, because I think that I've always had that side of me. I wasn't the huge partier, and I wasn't always the social butterfly out to have a good time. So yeah, my life was opening up in front of me exactly like it was supposed to. Well, my husband at the time and I were stationed at Fort Benning for several years, where I did end up working and for a bit managed a country barbecue restaurant down on Columbus Drive called Country's Barbecue, where I had some pretty interesting experiences there too. Being in charge of all the, kind of high school age waitresses, which was interesting. And by that time, my son was born. So while we lived there, he was born at Fort Benning. So that was really pretty cool. Well, once my husband's tour was up, he decided, and we decided, that we'd come back to Michigan, and he had gotten a job here, so we relocated. Well, things went interestingly for a time, and then we decided to relocate again, and we were going to work out a deal to buy the swimming pool company, which a lot of you who listen may know that I still do a lot of the operations coordination for. Well, it turns out about the time that we decided that we would be looking at buying this company, bought a new house, that was about the time where I decided maybe I didn't want to be married anymore. I think it was a mutual decision. There was a lot of things that lined up to that, and there was a bit of stress involved for several reasons with that decision, but ultimately that's what happened. So I've been there. I've been in that situation where you really don't know if there's a decision that you should make or not. And you don't know what's on the other side because it is big and scary. And here's what you know over here. And here's what you don't know, and it looks like it's over there. And you think maybe over there is the direction that you should go, but you're really not sure. And then sometimes it takes a trigger for that to flip, for that switch to flip. Well, for me, the switch flipped. And where I was not where I wanted to be anymore. So things changed. That's really the day I think that my adult life really started. So I ended up with my kids, my son being about 5 or 6 at the time and my daughter being about 7. Single mom, 2 kids. Just got a house. Actually had 2 at the time because the other one hadn't sold yet. And plans to take over this business, which was really contingent on there being 2 of us participating in it, but not really sure how that's going to happen. So a lot of uncertainty, and at the same time, the whole world just available for whatever might happen. Well, the good news in this whole story and the whole business situation is that the person that we were going to be buying the company from, or part of the company, he and I ended up having a really good working relationship. So when my ex-husband decided to relocate and eventually move out of state, I stayed here and partnered in the business instead of buying out or taking over the business in the way that we had thought, but ended up partnering in the business. So was the operations coordinator for the swimming pool company for several years, which was absolutely fantastic. I have had an experience of being able to be a single mom and raise my kids and not have to punch a time clock. If somebody needed me for something, I could be there. I do, and I have always worked a lot of hours. And there I work days, I work nights, I work weekends. It is all the same. There's not a time clock that I punch, and there's not a time clock that I have punched in a really, really long time. Turns out that sort of works for me. So I was working in the pool company for a while, and then, life started to change again. And there was a brief time in 2007 where I did not actually have a job. And that's another interesting episode in my life. So I'd been working for the pool company, some things needed to start changing. Didn't think I wanted to be a pool girl for the rest of my life. So ended up doing nothing for a period of time. And it was really interesting. I could probably tell you to the penny how much money I had in my bank account. And I could tell you all of the bills and all the commitments and all the, all those things and all the systems that we're supposed to be in. I could probably lay out a pretty clear picture for you of what that looked like. And I will tell you that for that time, there was a lot of turmoil going on in my life. But the one thing I can tell you that I didn't think about at all and caused me zero stress was money. I was free. I was absolutely free of thinking about money and systems and obligations for a little period of time. And that is probably the most euphorically free of the system that I have felt in my life since, of course, becoming an adult and learning about all these systems. Well, turns out during that time that my then business partner and I, and my current business partner and I, happens to be the same person, we talked about what could the future look like. And the location that the swimming pool company had been in was sold, so we started to run things a little bit more virtually. And that's where the idea for the Insights group was born in the summer of 2007. What if there could be a place where people could come together in the spirit of community, support each other, learn new things, and have incredible new ideas? Sounded like a pretty good idea. So remember the part where I had kind of quit working, could tell you to the penny how much money I had and how many obligations. A business partner who had sold his building a lot of other things happening, and then hey, we decide let's just start this co-working facility. It sounds like a great idea. So we thought, what's the first thing that we should do? Well, obviously the first thing that you should do if you're going to start a co-working facility is you should get a facility. So we started shopping for one, and it was relatively hard to find something with adequate parking, enough space, and all those parameters. Well, we ended up with a building that was 6,600 square feet of a warehouse, ugly, dirty, kind of greasy space. And the lease was 3 years, 6 figures. We had no business plan, no revenue stream, no furniture, no decorating budget, and so of course the natural thing was, sure, we'll take it. And we did. And the story of how the Insights group came together is rather magical. I couldn't even tell you how everything happened, because sometimes the universe just works things out for you. And if you don't believe that, I'm sorry. I absolutely know it because I lived it. How does a 3-year, 6-figure lease in a building of 6,600 square feet get signed? A building put together, and it opens for business with like no business plan, no revenue plan, no anything in the systems. And yet it's all as natural as can be. So it happened. When we first opened the doors, we had about 5 people that showed up for our very first meeting. And then we had 105 people at our 1-year anniversary. And we had about 200 people at our 2-year anniversary. And then things changed, and one of our building neighbors decided they'd like to gain some more space, and they offered to buy out our lease and help us relocate. And at the time, things again were changing in our business, because the one thing that I do know is that everything always changes. So we had looked at it, and I don't think that either of us, Al or I, were really ready for things to change. But we said, here it is, the universe is putting it in front of us, we should seriously look at this, so we did. And we relocated to what a lot of people refer to as Insights 2 on the other end of town. Slightly smaller, yet still pretty large, and a slightly different focus. Well, we were there for several months, and things kept changing, and it really wasn't the right place to be. So then we celebrated our 3-year Insights 3-year birthday there. And shortly after that, we decided things needed to change again. So we are now conveniently located in a trendy urban office in downtown Brighton, where we have a creative studio and where we run the operations of the Insights group and of the swimming pool company, which is a really interesting story all in itself. A company that when we started the Insights group and we got this building and we had all this stuff and we didn't have a budget, you know, there was this swimming pool company that we thought, well, it would be okay if it just went away. Well, the pool company had enough life in it for a couple of years. It was just kind of on standby. And then we really decided to take everything that we had started teaching and talking about, and I say we started teaching it, but really it started teaching us. All of these philosophies about social media, marketing, the thank you economy, taking care of your customers. Thanks to a guy who pointed out in a meeting that we had all these great theories and ideas. Why didn't we do that with the pool company? Well, we didn't do it with the pool company because we hadn't really wanted the pool company to keep going, but then we thought, I wonder what would happen if we did that. So we did. And I can tell you, it works. It really, really does. So here we are, almost approaching the Insights 4-year birthday. And my kids, 15 and 13 now. My daughter just got through driver's training. I would completely trust her to drive a car right now, anytime. And she's learning how to drive on a really, really, really large car. I think once you master a large car, you can do anything. I'm completely empowered. Back in the day when I was working at the pool company, my kids could come to work with me during the summer, which was fantastic. And my daughter, when she was about 7 or 8, she could run the whole pool store all by herself. If I had to go out somewhere um, to run an errand or anything like that, I would put one of the guys from the back in charge, but they were just in charge to be an adult in the room in case they were needed. And she, my daughter, waited on the customers and took care of everything, credit card processing, answering the phone, whatever needed to happen. My son, who's 13, he got that analytic part that I really don't enjoy. He is super duper creative. Science and figuring things out is his thing, and just the sweetest, most congenial, happy, peaceful person I've ever met. So if you listen to some of the personality discussions, you'll know that my daughter is very much like me, sanguine choleric, and my son is very much the opposite of me, phlegmatic melancholy. Although sometimes when we take the personality test, he tries to be all adventurous and choleric, but that's just what he projects that he wants to be sometimes. But he's really, really awesome the way he is. So we're almost celebrating our 4-year birthday for Insights. And in the last, 4 years since we started Insights, I've developed a speaking career, managed several entrepreneurial startups, sat on the board of nonprofit organizations, spoken and consulted internationally, and touched a lot more lives than I think that I give myself credit for. I remember a trip this summer to Colorado, and I remember driving in the rental car, which was having a little bit of high altitude difficulties, I think, because it was chugging just a little bit. And I remember I was on the side of the mountain, headed to Copper Mountain, the resort in Colorado. And I remember having the thought flash through my head, how does somebody know how many lives they've touched? Or how do they know when they have touched lives? And I was thinking of this on the side of the mountain because I was with a group of people that I consider to be absolutely phenomenal. There's so much inspiration in the room. People with all kinds of stories that I don't know all the details of, but I do know the time we have spent together, I've gotten to know a lot of their stories. And these are people that I find very significant. So sitting in a room of very significant people, I wondered, when does one learn that they are significant? So I was talking with Al, because he was attending the conference with me, and we were trying to figure out, when is that? And the funny thing is that I can see that Al is significant, and he can see that I am significant. Yet I don't think that either one of us would look at ourselves and say that we're significant. So we had this interesting discussion on the side of the mountain while chugging up the hill in the rental car about significance. And I think that the window opened for me just a little bit, and I decided that, yeah, I have met a lot of people. And I know that I've gotten stories that my presence in their life may have been a little bit of a help, which, sort of made me feel good. It didn't sort of make me feel good, it really made me feel good. And it makes me feel great. So there's the question of significance. I know that in the last couple of episodes that I've done, I've been talking about the last 3 to 4 weeks of my life have been like supercharged, turbocharged. For a while there, the trajectory was like at a VY, and I don't know enough about flying planes, which I might be learning soon. That might be on my list now. But I know that VY is the maximum kind of angle of trajectory that an airplane can take to reach its highest altitude at the best speed. And if you're, a pilot, you can probably fill in all the blanks of that really technical definition that I just gave you. So for a while I felt like I was on this trajectory, and it was all I could do to hang on and witness everything that was going on in my life. And the power of what I've seen and the power of what I've been through in the last month It's not meant for anyone else to know or to witness. It was meant for me. All of these things in my life lining up to show me with such clarity that the path that I'm on is absolutely the right path. It's the path that I'm supposed to be on. And the even better part is that I was able to recognize that the path that I'm on now, the absolute right path, is the same path that I have always been on. Whether or not I knew it at the time, whether it was easy or hard, which was all my perception, but again, perception's everything because that's all we have. I was able to connect a lot of the dots and understand why I made the decisions that I did and how those decisions affected absolutely everything that is going on in my life right now. So I had a moment back in Kansas City, which was probably just about a month ago now, where I was sitting on the side of it's not a river. My friend Gina from Kansas City, I'll say it's more like a creek. It's a pretty large creek. So it was late after the sessions for the day, and I was sitting by the river, and I had a moment that I had not to that point had in my life, where I was sitting next to the water, and I surrendered. I put down everything. Anyone who knows me knows that unless I'm a soccer mom at a game, which that's a whole nother personality study we could get into. If I go to a soccer game and I'm not in charge, I am a wallflower. I'm not really chatting with anybody. I kind of get in, blend in, do my thing, don't make waves, leave when we're done. But put me in charge of something. Now there's a different side of me that comes out. So sitting on the side of the river, I surrendered to the flow, to the moment, to whatever was going to happen. And in that moment that I did that, I knew with absolute certainty that I was absolutely perfect. Everything in my world was perfect. I didn't have to know what was coming because everything would be perfect. I would always be taken care of, which those aren't even the right words. I would always be in everything, with everything that I needed in any moment. And I knew with absolute certainty that my children would absolutely always be incredibly perfect and also taken care of, or they would have everything in every moment that they needed, as would everybody around me. I could say that that moment changed my life, but that would be a bit inaccurate. That's the moment where I realized that the life that I've been living has always been there in that moment. So on the way back from Kansas City is when we had the airplane episode with the backflips. And then when I got back, I had the wildest week of my life in trying to keep up with what the universe was showing me. Absolutely phenomenal. If anybody watches The Matrix, if somebody had come up to me and said, "Would you like the red pill or the blue pill?" in that moment, I would have said yes. I'll take the green pill for that matter. Such a phenomenal place of bliss and awareness and just everything being right with the world. It was absolutely fantastic. And when I look at that now, I continue to have these moments and these realizations and these dawning of awareness just about every day. And I could say that in the last month of my life, I finally met the me that's here, that was waiting for me to realize I was here. And I don't know if you'll comprehend what that means or not. And I don't know if you know in your life what you're working for or toward. I know in my life, I've been reading a lot of books, and I've been asking this question, so what's the point? What's the point? What's my purpose? Everyone's supposed to have a purpose. I really don't feel like I have a purpose. How will I know if I have a purpose? Well, it became clear to me that that question really wasn't relevant. So I met the me that I was meant to meet, and I discovered that my purpose has been here all along. And I don't have to define it. I don't have to manufacture it. I don't have to make it something that it's not. It's just I was here. And then if anybody caught my Facebook photos from last week, you'll know that the person that I was last Wednesday was a person in a place where I'd not ever been before. At a pretty high-profile event in LA with a lot of pretty high-profile people, where the previous Sandi would have thought, little old me at an event like this. And the newly aware Sandi knew that it was all a matter of perspective, and it was exactly where I was meant to be, and where I know that I will be much more, because it's all just a perspective. Nothing changed. There's not one thing that changed from the me when I was 16 to the me when I was 26 to the me that's me right now. There's nothing that changed. There's no switch that went on. There's no permission slip that came from somewhere and said, okay, you get to be this or do this now. It's just an internal perspective that means everything in the world to us as our human selves. Because as Wayne Dyer says, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And Sandi adds, and this is the vessel that I get to play with. So I'm going to play, and I'm going to experience this. And if you haven't read The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, I recommend that you pick them up immediately. Especially if you want to be in the Atlas Shrugged book club, which we're having a meeting on Tuesday, but even if you don't, I would love to have a discussion with you about the book at any point. There's a scene in the book where two of the main characters, Hank and Dagny, are having dinner at a restaurant where all of the maybe rich and famous and powerful go to have dinner. And they look at each other and they have some type of dialogue, which basically says, all the people that are trying to get to somewhere or be in the right place so that they feel like they can belong somewhere will always be seeking. And they looked at each other and they said that I feel like you and I, Hank and Dagny, have the ability to have a more enjoyable experience than any of the people who continue to be seeking. That's the way that I felt when I was at the event last week. That I know there's a lot of people that were in that room that were seeking. And I know that I wasn't seeking anything. I had no agenda. The only reason that I was being there was to be there. To experience that moment and find out what it had to offer. And then take that experience and be with it in my next moment of experience. So, Atlas Shrugged, highly recommend it. There's a lot of systems that I think we try to figure out. There's the system of what we should do, and you should go to school, and you should go to college, and then you should get a job. And I don't know how many people you know right now who should trying to get a job. Well, I think that we should each follow our inner compass, and we should follow where that takes us. And we should make the best decisions that we have at the time with the information that we have at the time. So in my life right now, I have a bit of a dream team around me. I have my business partner, and then I have 3 young individuals who are all 20-somethings. One who rollerbladed across the country, 3,400 miles. One who was addicted to drugs, who cleaned himself up, who assisted in the journey of someone else's rollerblading across the country, and someone else who decided to drop out of high school before he was finished to get his piece of paper, and who is one of the most brilliant individuals that I know, who is going places, let me just say. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel a little bit like a mama bear, and Al and I joke because Al is also on the dream team. Al Curtis, my partner at Insights, and really a philosophical and motivational mentor of mine. So Al and I joke, I feel a little bit like Mama Bear with some of the dream team. And yet they astound me with their talent, their ability, and the knowingness of what they want in their life. So I don't know if what I'm doing is helping the dream team establish themselves a little bit more, each of them as individuals, or if they're helping me get grounded a little bit more in myself each and every day, with the realization that every one of our stories is individual and unique, and there should be no judgment from any one of us on ourselves or anyone else in what we're doing. I can tell you that I've judged my story. The old me, who has always been here, but the old perspective me, always judged my story. And I know it's my story, and some people get glimpses of my story. Yet I judged my story. Because somehow, in the way that I chose to do things, I always felt like it wasn't, quite according to what the system would have expected. And if I had done what the system had expected, my life definitely wouldn't look like it does right now. And there is no better place that I could ever even imagine to be than exactly where I am right now. So at the summit that I was at in Kansas City, after I had that night of surrendering next to the water, the next day we had a half-a-day program in the morning, which was really monumental. I think the energy in that room was just absolutely swirling. And I came to a whole lot of new realizations about myself, and created an awareness in myself of just how much my presence here can and really does change the world. I had a conversation with a woman at the summit that next morning where I was offering some support in something that she was sharing with the group. And one of the things that I said was that as a single mom, coming through a divorce and raising children myself and wanting to provide everything that I possibly could for them, I said, I'd like for you to meet my children, because you could look at them and you could know that children coming through a divorce can be absolutely phenomenal without this broken baggage because of the system. There's so much of the system, and divorce is maybe not a good thing. And in some cases, it's not a good thing. In some cases, it's a brilliantly wonderful thing. And I looked at this woman, I said, I'd love for you to meet my children, because they are the most amazing people that I could ever introduce you to. And we were talking about children who come from divorce situations, and she said, yeah, it's important that parents create a safety net for their children. And I said, no. It's important that parents empower their children to make their way in whatever they're going to do. So I could have judged my story in many levels. I could have judged it from when I was a kid, to when I was in my teens, to when I was in my 20s. Now I'm currently in my 30s, and guess what I learned? I learned by showing myself that there shouldn't be judgment ever. And our story, my story, and your story are significant and important. And in this world, where we are all so individual, and where we are all exactly the same, we're all people, we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, and this, our human self, is the vehicle that we get to play with. It's the vessel. Our mind. All of these things are the things that we get to use to navigate our way through all of this. We can either use it, and we can go through life trying to apply ourselves to a system and wonder where the happiness comes from, and wonder when we'll ever feel like we're okay, when we'll ever measure up. Or we can learn that we've always been perfect, and that happiness is all a matter of choice, and it all comes from the perspective. Wow. Just had another thought. Kansas City also changed my life. in another way. Because I know that we never think about ourselves, what other people think about us, or maybe we do sometimes, but I think that as humans, we tend to judge ourselves so much more harshly than anyone else ever would. You know, most people fear public speaking because they'd hate to make a mistake in front of someone else. Yet everybody else is feeling the exact same way. And I don't know about you, but every time I've ever seen someone stumble in front of people, I am just cheering them on from the inside. There's no laughing and there's no belittling going on, so I don't know why we do that to ourselves. But here's something I did to myself in high school or in middle school, which are, you know, really significant developmental years in this whole human experience. I was academically gifted, you could say, without a lot of effort. Adhering to the system and getting good grades was definitely not a problem for me. And I won't say that I was a nerd, but I was not what I would consider one of the, you know, cliquey popular kids. I don't know that the cliquey popular kids ever feel like they really are, but I think that wherever we sit, we always think that the grass is greener on the other side, or we think that someone else is having a more phenomenal experience. Well, in Kansas City, I was hanging out with a couple of people who are gorgeous, blonde, thin, lovely, beautiful women, intelligent, smart, dynamic, and really, really fun to be around. And one of them at one point had looked at me and said, "Oh, you know, something about pretty girl," looking at me as if I was a pretty girl. As I'm looking at her going, "Wow, the pretty girl, did she maybe even say something about me being a pretty girl?" Shocking, isn't it? Because even in that moment, knowing that my life is fantastic and I've got things going on, there was still judgment coming from within me about me that, you know, not necessarily one of the pretty girls. But her comment in that moment changed my perspective like dominoes all the way from middle school to where I was at that moment. And it reset my perspective. Because if a pretty girl could look at me and call me a pretty girl, then shouldn't I be able to do that for myself? What is the lesson in that? I think the lesson in that is we need to stop judging ourselves and we need to stop selling ourselves short, because we are each exactly where we're supposed to be, and we are brilliantly stunning, twinkling, sparkling spirits. And we need to get out of our own way. We need to get out of that analytic side, the left brain side of ourselves, where all the judgment comes from and the processing and all of the would've, could've, should've. There's a system and there's judgment, and we need to live with ourselves from the perspective of the other side. The happy, brilliant, empowered art, life is fun, it's all an experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And I can probably get more in touch with my spiritual being side when I go with my emotional, intuitive, artistic, touchy-feely, human experience, equipped side than when I try to come at things with a system of would've, could've, should've. Planning, and this is how I'm supposed to get there. So yeah, this truly is the day where Sandi Maki, who's been hiding behind the veil of heavy breathing just before midnight, decided to make it a hell of a lot more real. So that's me. You know what? Sometimes there's just not words for us to express ourselves adequately. I am darn proud of who I am and the people that are surrounding me in my life. And I am so thankful and filled with gratitude each and every day with each of the new and amazing experiences that I get to have. and at the reflection of all of the moments that have put themselves together in my life, as if the universe were just paving that yellow brick road in front of me, and everything is right with the world. So, let's all stay real together, because we're all in this together. And as much as we like to think that we're so different than everybody else, guess what? We're all the same. And your story is brilliant. And my story is brilliant. And I think if we all started sharing our stories a little bit more, we would realize just how we are all the same. So hopefully you've enjoyed this real perspective as much as again, words just don't even explain, as much as I feel so amazing at having gotten to share it with you. So from the bottom of my heart and from the happy twinkling part of my spirit, thanks for being here with me, and thanks for listening.